Face. All right, I'm recording. We are live. Hi, everyone. My name is Sally from the Me Movement. Just here to help you look and feel great. And I've got a special guest here who found me, but I think the universe sent a little note to all of us, and we kind of found each other because this is Maria from Aligned You. She's a chiro. She's got a whole holistic approach. I've got a little intro here for her, but I think I'm going to let her do a little intro because she's got a lot of things. She's done a lot of things, including a great podcast that I listen to secretly. Because I really
are listening to it.
Yeah, I am listening to it. So a little bit of a fan here, but
the truth comes out.
That's it. But yeah, welcome. We're going to talk about stress. That's the topic. So let's talk stress. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Dr. M.
Thanks, Sally. I think it was the universe putting us together. You, lovely lady, are an absolute whirlwind of energy. After the first time we met, I literally walked back into the practice going, I'm not sure what just happened, but it was good. So it's always awesome to meet like-minded souls that are full of energy. So thank you for having me on and sharing me with your picks. Everybody calls me Dr. M or M. If I get called Maria, I generally feel like I'm in trouble these days, depending on when I've met you in my lifetime. No, that's all right. Generally, it means people don't know me if they call me by my full name. And I know you know me, Sal, so that's all right. I wear a few different hats. In practice, I'm an integrative chiropractor. As you mentioned, Sal, I also have a podcast that has over 150 episodes. My old podcast, Be the Queen of Your Stress, was voted #1 on BuzzFeed as a stress podcast, which is kind of cool. It has 125 episodes. We've just clicked over 150 episodes in total, and I did a big rebrand at the start of the year, and it moved to Aligned You, as in the letter U. So you can find that on iTunes and Spotify. What else do I do? I also I do corporate and organisation workshops around stress adaptation and also strengths as well, in terms of Gallup strengths, which is something I'm certified in. I wrote a book that I released last year that was called Align, Be the Queen of Your Stress. And that probably sums it up in a nutshell. But everything that I do really is focused around making sure that you're aligned in your body, head and heart, and that you're able to perform at your absolute best in your own unique way, and making sure that you're adapting well to the stresses around us. So I'm a stress adaptation and performance coach as well. So that's me in a big nutshell.
Okay.
And the reason why that stress adaptation piece is so important is because we all have stressors on us every single day. And really what it comes down to is how well we are or are not adapting to it. So that's what I help people do, is really recognize that early on, learn how to manage it, and then so you can actually use your stress for good rather than it using you for not so good things.
And this is the world of constant ongoing stresses. This is perfect timing, and it's also a perfect timing that we are doing this live.
Absolutely.
So I had a bit of a Google, and Google my mate. I had a look, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to punch in stress, and I want to see what pops up, populates. And the first thing that comes up is more of the emotional stress and stress at work. That's the first thing that comes up. And I'm like, hold on a second. As a strength and conditioning coach, and I've got my degree in exercise and sports science, the first thing that they teach you is you need stress. When you strength train, you need stress. So when I typed it in, a couple of meanings came up. So pressure or tension exerted on a material object. Another one came up as a state of mental, emotional tension. But I guess out of all that, context is very important.
Absolutely. And one of the most, I suppose, regularly book talks that I do at various places if I'm doing keynotes is the good, bad and ugly of stress, because there's absolutely good stress. There's stress that it tips into bad, and if it becomes a chronic issue and you're really not coping with it well or adapting to it well, that's when it gets a bit ugly, and that's where symptoms start, disease, and then disease also occurs. So I think one of the areas that people often miss when it comes to stress is that you can keep it simple. And if you can put it into 3 categories, it's either going to be emotional stress, as you mentioned earlier. It can be chemical stress in terms of what you're either ingesting or putting onto your system. And also then there's the physical stress. But as you mentioned, some physical stress is good, right? Otherwise, we actually stay in our old zone and we don't continue to improve. And we can absolutely use stress to our benefit, and we can leverage it to actually increase productivity and also development, whether that's physically, within how our system is working, or then also emotional and mental growth as well. We've got to be under some stress because nothing happens in our comfort zone, right?
Yeah, I know that personally. I work really well under stress. It's just the way I work. Some people don't, but for me, there has to be some kind of a pressure, whether it's for kind of work or doing an assignment or added load with working out. For me, it works well, and that comes to my next little point here. I've got: is it good or bad? Can we actually define it?
Stress?
Yeah.
There is good and bad stress would be my suggestion. Where it tips over to being bad is when your body is not coping with it anymore. In the sense of, let's take the deadline, for example. So I'm a bit like you. If I don't have a deadline, it doesn't happen. But I was actually talking about this in a masterclass I was running the other night, is if you think about, I don't know if you've ever read Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He has his productivity quadrant, and up the top is urgent and important. Then there's important and not urgent, and then down the bottom, I don't even talk about that bottom half, I might as well just call that procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
But that top half, there's people like you and I that absolutely, if it's not urgent and important, we're probably not going to do it. Now, for some of your viewers and some of your members, is that actually might freak them out to actually sit in that particular zone. They much prefer to be in important and not urgent and have time to get it done. So it depends how we're actually made up as far as that's concerned. But where it turns into bad stress is, let's say you or I like to work to a deadline, but we've left our deadline so tight we can't get it done. And then we get into a state of overwhelm. And then it actually sets off a cascade of other biochemical and physical reactions where our cortisol levels are now going through the roof, which is our stress hormone. That's what happens when we get stuck into fight-flight. So we just want to be mindful of how we're actually managing those stresses. And if you're getting into, really when it comes to stress as well, there's 3 different stages. There's that alarm stage of, oh shit, I've got to get it done. Or sugar, sorry if I just swore and I'm not allowed to swear on here. Oh shit, I've got to get this done. To getting, which I would consider alarm. Resistance is where you're continually doing that and your body's actually starting to give you signs and signals that it's not good for you. Or then the 3rd level of that is exhaustion, which is that's when it's so chronic that your body's really giving you some key signals that you need to change things up. Otherwise, you're going to get sick. That's kind of how I look at it. Okay, so
that's my second part of that little question. So the first part, is it bad or good?
I love it when people take your questions off you because they just keep talking.
It's all right, we're redirecting. What happens if we constantly apply it, which you said, like a sleep, we can't function properly, it could affect our digestion, all that stuff. But what happens if we completely take it away?
Completely take stress away?
Yeah, can we take it away? Can we completely take it away?
I'm not sure where you're going in the world that you could completely take it away.
That's right.
That's impossible. Yes. I think the reality is stressors, not necessarily stress, because let's be clear about this, external stressors are always around us.
Okay.
There's always external pressures. How we deal with them, how we cope with them, how we respond or react to them, that becomes our choice. So what we can take away is, as much as possible, not always, is reacting to things that we shouldn't be giving our time and energy to. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
But as far as being able to take stressors away, impossible, because we all have them. Unless you live on a Himalayan mountaintop with 0 stress and you're like literally in meditation 24/7, which for most of the people watching this particular video, that's not them. So you can't actually take those stresses away, but what you can do is make sure that you are reacting to them in the best possible way in terms of your body, head and heart.
Okay. So the big takeaway from that little section is the way you react.
Correct. But even better is whether you respond, because reacting and responding are 2 different things. So reacting is an unconscious, automated impact of an external stressor. If we're responding to something, that's actually meaning that we're taking a conscious moment to how do we want to show up in this particular moment? Absolutely.
Okay. So say that again. Reacting is like
automated. And by the time we're 35, which I've clicked over 35 a few years ago now, but by the time we're 35, most of our emotional responses are automated. Reactions are automated. We can actually reprogram that. We might have a chat about that a different time. That is a longer conversation. But we can actually reprogram that because of neuroplasticity, which is super freaking cool. That our brains are plastic and we can actually make changes to the pathways, but we have to be doing that consciously. And so that's where reaction becomes automated. It's like, you hear a song, for example, that has an emotional moment for you. It perhaps reminds you of a particular event, and your reaction is to take you straight back to that emotion that you felt at that time. I get affected by music. It happens all the time. There's certain songs I really struggle to listen to now, and there's other songs that it just takes me straight back to a happy moment, which I really enjoy. responding is where we're actually taking a conscious moment to go, how do I want to show up in this moment? And
that's hard.
actually, it takes practice.
So hard.
It takes practice.
Yeah.
Once you get into it, it's always going to be hard if you think it's going to be hard, but it does. It takes practice. The more practice you're at it, the easier it gets.
Yeah. I think I'm
and
guilty of
you
that.
catch yourself in it more.
Yes. I don't know what it sounds. Maybe it's my passion for life. I'm going to call it passion, or my background where I'm just maybe a bit more reactive, that I just have to stop and just go, hey, that person didn't say hello because maybe they got their headphones on. Just calm down. Just bring it down a notch. Or maybe they didn't see you. I mean, I read a story about this lady that used to go to pick up her child one day, and this mother never said hello. She never said hello. Then finally, I think she approached her or figured out that she had a lot of stuff happening at home, and she actually did not see that person. So I love that responding point. That's really, really.
Absolutely. And I think that also comes down to, again, it's conscious choice when we're talking about backgrounds and things like that. Well, my cultural background is fiery. So that is my go-to excuse for everything.
That's me.
My background's not fiery. my dad was Hungarian. He had a fiery temper, but like over the years, I've definitely excelled that because there's just things that I don't give my energy to. So it depends in terms of how for sure, there's elements of our cultural upbringing and our environment that we've been brought up in that will have us have tendency to respond in certain ways. Same way of our cultural backgrounds have our responses to how we celebrate. I know in my family, it was always celebration with food. And that's why over the years and then my background is I'm Eurasian. So my dad was Hungarian and then my mum was Eurasian. So I'm a big bloody genetic experiment. So I should have been eating like an Asian child, but we were eating like Hungarian children that got fed a lot of carbohydrate-based food. So over the years, carrying extra weight when I was stressed was something that I had to really rejig how my body actually responded to stress. So I used to carry about 30, 35 extra kilos, and that would go on very quickly any time that I had been under stresses for a long period of time. But we can change that if we're conscious about it. It takes time and it takes discipline, like all things. It's like if people start training with you and they expect to be fit because they've run around the park once, it's not going to happen, folks. If you haven't trained in 10 years and you can't just do one session with you and expect to have a back to your fitness level that you had when you were a teenager or when you were 21.
I mean, that's the interesting part as well. Just touch on that. It's a bit different topic, but we change. Our, just the environment starts to change and how we react change. How we used to train 10 years ago, and I got a lot of clients that come in and say, I was under less stress. I could train. I could lose 5 kilos like that. Then I got older. I had kids, and then I'm like, I can't even lose this 1 kilo. What used to work before, not going to work now.
Exactly.
Just the way it is.
Yeah. And also we have, as our hormones, as we get older, whether we're men or women, it's different. It's a little bit trickier for women as we're getting older, as you hit your 30s, as I'm 43, as I get into my later 40s, into my early 50s, is that my hormones are going to change. That's the reality. The work that I do around how my genes are going to express though over the next 10, 20, 30 years, that's going to be the key to then how I show up externally, but also internally as well. So that's why working with beautiful people like yourself to make sure we're staying strong and doing weight-bearing activities is super important. Coming and checking out somebody like me in terms of from an integrative chiropractic point of view to make sure your body is in the best possible alignment is going to help it's going to help your body adapt better to the stresses and changes that it's going to experience, because that's the nature of our life cycle. As we're getting older, our physiology, our biochemistry actually changes. So actually having the ability to adapt well to that and in the best possible way, super important. If you want to be vital, if you just want to go with the flow and be mediocre, then keep doing what you're doing. But if you want to be actually vital and buzzing and energetic, there's certain things you can do to actually help with that.
So how do we adapt? Is there some tools that we can use when we're feeling a little bit stressed, or even like, just say I'm hitting my workout, I'm just not really getting it. My heart rate isn't going up that great. Like, the other day I wore my little heart rate monitor. I've got a little strap there. I've got a little wristwatch, and I just constantly monitor my heart in terms of, I just want to hit that threshold. I hit 172, couldn't stay there long. But the next day I hit 150 and then 160, and I couldn't stay there. So how do I deal with that mental block, or just go, I didn't hit that, I'm terrible, I suck, I'm going to stop? Is there any tools that I could use?
Well, there's so many, Sally, and it depends how long you want to go. But top three. Number one thing that I would say to you, and I talk about this at length regularly, be really mindful how you're talking to yourself. I have a feeling if anybody spoke to your partner, a family member in the way that you just spoke about yourself, you would get up in their face.
Mm-hmm.
You would be like, don't speak to her like that. Don't speak to them like that. So self-talk, number one. Within that self-talk, so I'm going to use this as still the one thing so that I get extras. But the thing with that as well, with that self-talk, is give yourself a little bit of grace. If you didn't hit a particular mark on that day, my self-reflection would be, why? Was it, what time of the month was it? Did I eat well today? Have I had a massive fight and barney with a family member before I went and trained? Am I distracted because I'm under the pump in other areas? Have I got a truckload of bills due and I'm not sure how I'm paying? Whatever that is for you, if you've got other things going on in your world right now, it's unlikely you're going to show up very well at training. So give yourself some grace and just check in with yourself as to, well, why didn't I show up in the way that I thought I might have been able to do? And so that's why. Sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, like, you can apply that to if you're at work or a job or anything. Same principle. Doesn't have to be working
100%.
out.
No, absolutely. One of the things that I speak about regularly, and it's in my podcast, if your viewers want to check it out, which is the Aligned You podcast. It's on iTunes or Spotify. I talk about my worry meter. I don't know if you heard me talk about the worry meter yet, Sal? Yeah, so it's a really cool tool. I've been teaching it now for over 5 years. There's moments where I go, I'm going to drop it out because everyone's heard it, and then I always put it in and people thank me for it. So basically, if you think about 3 columns, so if people have got a pen and paper, is make 2 columns, so there's 2 lines, so there's 3 columns. And then what you want to do is on the left-hand side is you want to put things you can't change, right-hand side things you can change, and in the middle might be a bit of a question mark of, I'm just not sure if I can or can't change it. And anything that's going on forefront of your brain will fit into one of those 3 columns. Mm-hmm. So for example, is in that moment after you've done your workout, if you've given it your best, you actually can't change where your heart rate was, right? Like you can't go, heart rate, I'd like 170, please. Now, go. Yes. So that's can't change. So you can either then spend the next 24 hours having the shits and going, right, I'm going to get it tomorrow. And then what happens? It's worse, right? Or you can go, I did everything that I could in that day and I didn't quite hit where I wanted to be. Mm-hmm. So I took all the right actions, for example, but I can't control the outcome. So I'm actually just going to release it, accept it, and let it be to its greater good. Things that you can change, if we're sticking with that example, might be, well, actually, I didn't eat that well before I worked out. So I could probably make different choices. And then it's about making the big, bold step and decision to put the crap food and the processed food to the side and fuel properly for the workout that you want to do. Now, things that might sit in the middle that are a bit of a question mark is if you've done all the right things and consistently you're not hitting the mark that you want to, is then get help of a professional or a mentor or a coach like yourself or myself to go, what am I missing? Is there something in this that I'm actually missing? And that's where having guidance of whether it is, look, it is just something you can't control at the moment, it dumps into the can't control pile, or if it is like, yeah, you're just missing the mark, then it turns into the I can control. So we take 3 things, we simplify it again into 2, and it means we get clearer action steps that we then can move forward with. So the worry meter is my, well, it really is my number 1 tool. They're my 2 favorite kids, if you like, from self-talk and the worry meter. Those 2 tools alone can make a massive difference of how you're adapting to stress. Because what happens for most people is they sit in the space of things they can't control all day. You know, you wake up, you know there's an issue you have 0 control over, but you spend your whole day thinking about it, and it tends to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the end of the day, it's like this major SHIT storm that you still can't control. Versus if at the start of the day, you let it go and you put your focus into things you can control, that's where amazing stuff happens.
Beautiful. That's such great points there. The big takeaway for me is just let it go. Sometimes you can't control it.
You need to sing the song from Frozen, do it. If that puts you in.
I had to think about that for a while. Yes, I had to think about that for a while, but you know, I totally get it. And it's just like some of my clients or people that I meet, you know, if we train for a certain period of time and then COVID happened and everybody just kind of, life happened, and then they feel really bad about stopping, you know, because they've progressed so far and they stop, and then they take another 6 months to kind of, actually beat themselves for 6 months or so, even more, or
Crazy town.
or a year. But if we can get the word out, if only you can be a little bit more kinder to yourself, because the mental health is massive. Let's not deny it.
Oh, absolutely. And particularly at this time, like there's lots of things that are outside of our control of what's going on in our community. And depending where you live, who people are watching this, particularly, even if you're talking about within Australia, obviously there's lots of different rules between each state that we live in, which we've never experienced before. So we're living in new terms and conditions. And so it's figuring out within that, how can you be at your best within it? And as I said, one of my favorite things to talk about is self-talk. And the thing that I would always keep at the forefront of your mind, if you are speaking to yourself poorly, if you're beating yourself up, is if that was happening to your nearest and dearest, what would you do? And you'd make that person stop. You would get in between that person and go, what the hell do you think you're doing? So and it sounds so simple, and it's an area that if you've been training yourself for decades to speak to yourself poorly, it takes some time to retrain. And so one of the suggestions that I always make is you can get chalk texters, and you can actually write yourself a message on your bathroom mirror, because it actually
I do that. What are you doing?
So even if
I do that. I draw pictures too.
Yeah, well, whatever floats your boat.
I can't really draw. It's like stick figures, but you know.
Stick figures is cool. Whatever inspires you to remember that you are awesome, then that's unreal. Like a few years ago now, when I used to have a practice down in the South Coast in Shell Harbour, and I used to run big wellness events down there. And we did a screening of Embrace, which I'm not sure if you've watched that documentary with Taryn Buffett. It's all about body image. You should check it out. It's cool. It's a few years old now. And I had over 200 people there, 4 generations of women, like kids through to great grandparents in the room. And I spoke about the fact that there's a slide actually that it's on my Instagram page. It says, I am beautiful, I am strong, and I am smart. Something like, and I am enough. And I was talking about the importance of self-talk and using this particular chalk texter. And a little girl came up, and her mum, you know, if you're at the end of an event, and I can always tell people are waiting to speak to me, and the mum and daughter waited specifically to talk to me. And I said, oh, how'd you enjoy it? And the little girl was crying. And I said, what's going on? And she said, I do. And the mum said, thank you for tonight. I said, oh, you're welcome. What was the takeaway? And the little one, she was the most gorgeous 13-year-old. Like, this kid could have been a model, right? And she said, I realized I shouldn't tell myself I hate myself anymore. And then they met, and I said, yes. And by the end, like, I'm crying too. It was one of the most powerful moments of anything I've ever done. And it absolutely creates a fire in my belly to keep teaching. Because it's one of those moments where within an hour, a mum had sent me an inbox on Facebook to say, thank you so much. We've gone over to Kmart. We've got our chalk texters. This little girl was already writing her affirmations across the mirror. Now, obviously, that's a starting point. That's not going to solve all the problems of the world. But if we can actually start by speaking nicely to ourselves first, give ourselves oxygen first, then again, it has a beautiful ripple effect.
I love that. I did a challenge to my clients last year, and I said, like, I'm not a big challenge person, because I believe that you need to be able to do this long term. So it can't be just 6 weeks and that's it. So I said to them, for 7 days, I want you to write something positive about yourself when you look in the mirror. Not even one person was able to finish that 7 days.
Really?
Yeah, because there were days where, like, I don't feel great, I'm not writing it.
Okay, so that's where my reframe for that would be actually set the intention first, and you read that for the next 21 days. Because it takes 21 days to start setting a habit neurologically. It actually takes 66 days for it to actually sit more as a permanent habit. And we don't ever actually break habits. Neurologically, they're always there. But what we can do is we can create stronger habits. And so particularly over the last 6 months, you know, and your viewers might know, I've been under a lot of external stresses completely outside my control over the last couple of years, but particularly the last few months, because my mum passed about 5 weeks ago now that we're recording this. And so
5 weeks, wow.
Yeah, I know, it's gone fast, huh? It's crazy. It's really crazy. But within that is that I know that in that period of time through Mum's journey with cancer over the last couple of years, is because of all the groundwork I've done with my self-care, self-love, ability to adapt to stress, it creates foundations that when I'm under the pump, my habits go back to good habits. Sometimes they drop back to not so great habits. I was eating for my mum. I call her Yoda, as you know. Is that I was eating for Yoda for about 4 weeks, and then I went, it's going to look like I'm carrying Yoda if I don't reel this in. But it's one of those things where if we've got great, strong foundations of training in terms of our spinal health, in terms of our breath, how we breathe is really important. It's one of the things I focus on with my clients. That we're eating to minimize the inflammation that's in our system, And most importantly is our mindset. I call it the aligned you consciousness, which is how are we thinking about every day? How do we want to show up? How do we want to be healing? How do we want to be performing? And that can make a massive difference. But if to help us automate things is actually just starting off with that one word. It could be, or a couple of words. I used to have I am enough across my bathroom mirror for a good 18 months. And I just read it every day. And what you find is that becomes your default rather than trying to come up with something new every day. Because when you're practicing initially, that's hard.
Yeah. So you heard it first, guys. One thing, practice it, 21 days, and let us know. So I guess, like, you know, time has definitely flown with this. It's very interesting. It's very natural. I'm really enjoying it. But I want to get back to the whole stress. What are our takeaways? What do we need to do to really like get this to sink in? And you know, how do we use it to our advantage? Because it's going to happen. The environment's there. You know, just give me like 2 points out of all of this that you just really want to nail that message out to people who are watching. Just 2 points.
Yeah, cool. You realise that it's hard for me to only speak in 2 sentences. And I think I just took the 2 sentences in explaining that. In terms of the biggest takeaways for using your stress is, number one is to know your baselines to start with. It might sound like going back to the beginnings, but if people want to jump onto my website, there's actually a stress adaptation quiz they can do. It's free to do, and it gives you your baselines of how well am I adapting or not adapting to stress? Because we need to know that first. Because you don't want to add more stress in before you know where you're at, right? So that's my number one thing. The second thing is understanding that there is good stress.
Yes.
It's super simple, and I like to keep things simple rather than complicating them, is that understanding that within good stress, looking at what is the next most important thing that I need to do. Because when we're looking at the bigger picture and going, holy cow, I have so many things to do, I'm under pressure and I'm getting pulled and prodded from so many places, is really just taking a moment, get into a good breath, which perhaps we can talk about on another time, and then actually looking at what do I need to get done next that's going to make the biggest impact in my day, or that's going to take the pressure off me, rather than putting it off and off and off. Hope that makes sense. So that would be my 2 biggest takeaways for today.
Beautiful. And my big thing is, hey, it's going to happen. It's there. Dealing with it, you're reacting and thinking about how you're going to respond to it is a big thing that I've learned in this session, which is, I think, is a big takeaway.
Absolutely. And even if you can do one thing for me, is if you're finding that you're overwhelmed, if you can actually take 3 good diaphragmatic breaths. What I mean by that is if you put your hands on the side of your ribs and you're breathing in, your ribs should expand outwards. You shouldn't be breathing up into your chest. Okay. And if you can take 3 diaphragmatic breaths before you start spewing anything out of your mouth, you would be amazed how different what's coming out of your mouth might be.
It's funny. I've been talking to my mum because my mum, there's a term in Arabic where it's like you have to take 5, count to 5.
Yeah.
Count to 5. That's what it is. But look, it's been great. This is our first time on the live on the Zzzoom Zoom. I don't know why I called it Zzzoom Zoom. I just thought it was funny. But anyway, I sent her a text. I'm like, hey, when I do a Zzzoom Zoom, it's like, okay, cool. But I'm sure we're gonna have plenty more. Thank you for taking time out of your day. I hope everybody.
You're so welcome, mate.
I hope everybody got something out of it. I'll be sharing Dr. M's page and her fantastic little quizzes and content to use. Check out her podcast. It's definitely helped me. Thank you, everybody. Have a lovely Thursday, and I will chat to you soon.
Good on you, Sal. Thanks for having me on, mate.
Bye.